How's it going, guys? My name is Tavarish, and today is a really good day. You'll never guess what I'm driving. I don't know why I try to build up suspense for these things. You guys have already seen the thumbnail. It's a 1990 Nissan R32 GT-R. Oh yeah. So if you guys are new to the channel, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy it. Today is going to be an awesome day because I'm actually driving a car, and that's kind of rare on my channel, but I'm going to try to do it more and more often. You see, sometimes I get cars that aren't mine in my garage, but people want me to give my driving impressions and what the whole experience of the car is like, and this is going to be a fun one because this is a 1990 Nissan Skyline GT-R, and this is not mine, unfortunately, but it was provided to me by the guys at Prime Driven. And Prime Driven, as you might know from my Evo video, they're in the business of giving away cars, and this car is their number 10 giveaway car, meaning that you can actually win this car by going to their site, primedriven.com, and buying some merch. They have not only t-shirts, which are pretty cool on their own, but they have mugs, they have a lot of really interesting stuff, and every $1 spent means you have one entry to win this beautiful car. I mean, this is collector quality. This is the cleanest one I've ever seen. It doesn't have any rust. All the maintenance was performed, and it's just in perfect shape. It really is a gorgeous car. But in addition to this car, you also get $5,000 cash. And while that is a nice payday, that also takes care of stuff like taxes and shipping and all that stuff, just so you don't get stuck with a big bill when you win this car. And hopefully one of you will win this car. I really wish it was me. So before we go into what makes this particular car special, I wanted to go into a little bit why the model of Skyline is just one of the best, most iconic cars ever made. So contrary to popular belief, this was not the first Skyline. A lot of people think that this was the Genesis, the Godzilla, but no, the Skyline brand has been around since the 50s and even around before Nissan took control, because this used to be a model for the Prince Motor Company, and then that evolved into the Nissan Skyline when those two companies merged in the late 60s. So this wasn't actually the first GT-R. There were actually a few GT-Rs before this, but this has a lot of really cool firsts that I'll go over in a few minutes. But the first Skyline GT-R, or in the Japanese pronunciation, Skyline, I'm not making fun of any Japanese people, that's actually how it's pronounced. The first Skyline was made in 1969, and it was known as the PGC-10, but it was known by fans as the Hakosuka, or if you live in Minnesota, Hakosuka. And that car, like all the GT-Rs, were originally designed to go racing. These were homologation race cars, essentially, and these were designed with that in mind. Now flash forward to the power-crazed 80s and you get this. This is the R32 model, and this has a lot of interesting firsts, the first of which I'll show you right here. Also, right-hand drive, check that out. That is, well, it's not the best in drive-thrus, but it is awesome in terms of experience. So let's go down here, let's open up the hood, and let's see what this thing has. And ta-da! So this is the Nissan RB26 DETT. So RB is a designation for the engine. The D means double overhead cams, E for electronic ignition, I believe, or something or other. Somebody's screaming at me in the comments. And the TT stands for twin turbo. That's right, this has two turbochargers, and it makes, well, the power figure is a little bit contested. Here's what I'm talking about. Now, since this car was made in the power-crazed 80s, they were crazy about power. And there was something called a gentleman's agreement between the Japanese car companies. So Mitsubishi, Nissan, Toyota, they all had sports cars. They all had cars that would basically annihilate each other, but they had an agreement to say that none of their engines, none of their cars would go over an arbitrary figure, let's say 276 horsepower. However, because auto manufacturers are auto manufacturers, they all want to win, they never really stuck to that number, meaning that this engine, although it says it claimed 276 horsepower, it actually made bone stock from the factory around 310 horsepower. And that is detuned because they originally made this engine to be competitive in a racing environment, meaning that this was designed to be 500 horsepower. But when they put it in this car, they detuned it with ECU and exhaust and boost pressure. So it made around 300 horsepower, but with a little bit of modding, this thing was a complete powerhouse. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will see that this is not a stock engine. This has a little bit of that lost power back. You have these Apexy intakes, you have a bigger radiator so it doesn't overheat even with large amounts of boost, and it has some aftermarket Tane flex coilovers. These are actually very good. They are adjustable, I believe, in dampening and also ride height. Coming back here, we have an HKS high power catback exhaust, which does sound pretty good, and it is quite pricey. These things, I don't know if you've ever tried to price out a real JDM Japanese exhaust, but yeah, they're quite expensive. But if we come down here, we can see these amazing looking wheels. These are NK NTO3s, and they're square stance, meaning that they're 18 by 9.5 all around with 265 wide tires all around, and the tires are brand new Sumitomo HTR Z2s, which are the same tires on my SL55 and the same tires that allowed me to get a 12.5 at 110, which was half a second faster than what the Car and Driver guys got. So these are pretty decent tires. Going further down the mod train, we see a Nismo short throw shifter and a Skunk 2 shift knob. It's a weighted shift knob. It feels really good, and it's super short. So we're gonna get into how that feels a little bit later on the test drive, but I wanna get into just the condition of this car. Now, this car was made in 1990, which was almost 30 years ago. I feel real old. So look at this paint job. This paint is amazing. It's super sparkly. There's no blemishes and no rust. So these have a problem with rusting. These early 90s cars, actually 80s and 90s cars from Japan, they are notoriously thin-skinned, and they don't like having any salt or anything underneath, but it is just so clean. They usually rust around these wheel arches. I mean, for a car that is being given away, I can't imagine something better than this. Also, a lot of you will have known this from my Evo review, but I am in love with cars with a rear wiper. Why don't more cars have this? This makes no sense. This is basically a sedan body, and they have a rear wiper. America, get on this. Do this. This is very useful. All right, enough of me ranting about this car. Let's go and drive it. All right, getting into a right-hand drive car is always a little bit weird because even though I'm used to getting into the passenger side on a regular left-hand drive car, now you have a steering wheel in the way, and that steering wheel means you have to do a kind of a little curtsy with your left leg here. And once you're in though. So, welcome to the 80s, everybody. This is what the height of Japanese design was in the late 80s and early 90s. And would you take a look at this? So you have these three gauges. You have battery voltage, you have oil temperature, and you have boost pressure in times 100 millimeter pigs. But then you take a look right in front of you and you have the gauges that make the most sense, even though I think the boost would probably make the most sense up here. So you have the speedometer, which goes up to 180, but that's kilometers an hour, so that's around 110 miles an hour. And you have the rev counter, which goes all the way to 10. And I don't think we can rev up there. We can probably rev up to like 7.5 or something, but 10 is a good round number to have on a rev counter. I definitely approve. So then you have the gas gauge, that's normal, and then you have the front torque. So you can give between 0 and 50% of torque to the front. Now, I will get into the all-wheel drive system in this car when we go for a drive, because it is very unique, and it's not like any all-wheel drive system, any conventional all-wheel drive system. But if we look over here, we have our oil pressure, and then we have our coolant temperature. So everything that we need is right here. This steering wheel is amazing. This is a airbagless steering wheel, and I really love the look of this. It just says GT-R right here emblazoned, and the horn, it's a horn. It's a Japanese horn, and it sounds very Japanese. But another thing that's interesting about this car is that in usual JDM cars, you have the stalks switched, meaning that now that you're on the right side of the car, you have the stalks, which would usually be your turn signals right here and your windshield wipers. Now it's turn signals and windshield wipers. But right here, there's no windshield wiper anything. All the windshield wiper functions are here on the gauge cluster. But there are a lot of interesting quirks and or features, hashtag Doug DeMuro, about this right-hand drive configuration. First off, adjusting the mirror with your left hand, I've never done that in my life before, so it is quite it's just funny. Also, shifting is its own little battle, but once you get used to it, it becomes second nature, and it actually feels quite good. So if we go down here, we can see the climate control, automatic climate control in 1990. That's sort of insane. And you have your tape deck, and I have not tried this because this has Japanese frequencies, which we don't get in the US, so you can't actually pick up any radio stations, which is a bummer, but this is part of the Japanese JDM experience. So enough of me rambling, let me start the car. Also, take a look at this key. Just says GT-R on it. It's looks like it's made of aluminum. It's just awesome. So, and okay, and we start. Ooh, and it is nice and quiet. It's super quiet. I believe it still has the stock cats on it. It doesn't have any sort of really aggressive exhaust, but it does have that HKS high power cat back. So you can hear it a little bit, which we definitely will on the drive. But before we drive, take a look at this. I love this switchgear. I've never seen it like this with the driver's side in front of the passenger side, which makes it super easy to do both down or both up. Also, you have automatic up in a car from 1990. That's sort of cool. And also in a car from 1990, check this out. Yeah. Wow, we're living in the future, ladies and gentlemen. Living in the future. All right, let's roll these windows up. Let's make sure that we don't have any wind noise. And let's buckle our seatbelts from the other side. And let's head out. So this has a carbon twin disc clutch, which would usually mean that it's jerky or it's just very on and off like a race clutch. This is one of the smoothest clutches, bar none, that I've ever had the pleasure of driving. This is smoother than stock, if you can believe that. So we put the clutch in, put it in first, and away we go. It's super duper easy. So another thing that's weird about right-hand drive, I mean, this isn't weird about this car, it's just, oh, squirrel in the road. Come on, little squirrel. Come on, buddy. There we go. Up, up. Okay, there we go. So one thing that's really interesting about right-hand drive is that when you shift, it starts feeling second nature. So I'm going to third to fourth, and that's pretty easy. But the weird one is third to second. So let's go back to third, and then let's go back to second. So second is away from you, and you have to use these muscles that you've not used pretty much ever in your life. And takes a little bit of getting used to, especially with something like this, like the Nismo short throw shifter that I have here. But once you get it, it feels so good. Now the power delivery of this car is just otherworldly. It's not supercar quick, but it can be, and that's the whole point of cars like this. These are detuned race cars, and although some other sports cars from this era from Japan were made to compete with the likes of, let's say, the RX-7 or the Supra or even the Corvette here in America, this one was designed to compete with a Porsche 959, and boy howdy can you tell. This is definite race car stuff. So one thing that's a minor gripe with me and this car is the fact that it's a 5-speed. And the later iterations of these, the R33s and R34s, had a 6-speed manual transmission, which gave it an overdrive that it desperately needs. So right now, I'm doing about 60 miles an hour, something like that, 100 kilometers an hour, and I'm going around just under 3,000 RPMs, which is a little higher than I'd like to be. I think with a 6th gear, it would get to around 2,000, and you can get better fuel economy with that. But the fuel economy with this, being a 2.6 liter inline 6, and when you're not really into the boost too much, it's actually not that bad. Right now I have a little more than a quarter tank, and I don't anticipate driving that much that I wear that down in this drive. So now that we're basically just cruising, I can tell you about the all-wheel drive system in this car. And the all-wheel drive system is very, very unique. What I love about it is the fact that it's not really all-wheel drive. This is a rear-wheel drive car with some part-time all-wheel drive functionality. So this has the Atessa ETS all-wheel drive system. And the Atessa, I might have to look this up, but I believe it's Advanced Traction Technology Entertainment. It stands for Advanced Total Traction Engineering System for All Terrain. and I totally didn't just look that up on my phone. So it also has an ETS system, which is electronic torque split. And what that means is it has a traditional rear-wheel drive transmission, meaning that the drive goes directly to the rear wheels, but there's a transfer case that has an electronic clutch, which is controlled by a computer and a pump, and that puts up to 50% of the drive power to the front wheels. But one interesting thing is that the more you push this car, the more it becomes rear-wheel drive. So it actually pushes towards oversteer than understeer, like other cars that are all-wheel drive. Oversteer is when the passenger's scared, understeer is when the driver's scared. One thing that this car has mastered is the fact that there's really not a lot of turbo lag. In the late 80s and 90s, there were a lot of cars with turbos and lots of high power figures. However, they had crazy amounts of turbo lag. But with this, with two turbos, two small turbos, that meant that you can get a lot of mid-range in this car without going crazy with the turbo lag, without having it catching you off guard. So this car is very usable in the mid-rev ranges, and even though it does rev out to 7,000 or 8,000 RPM, I actually don't know what the red line is, I probably should have researched that, it does have a very good, very usable power band. It is so good. So good. And when you turn it in, you get that just hint of body roll because this suspension is set up for a more comfortable feel. These are Tane Flex coilovers, and these are actually the same coilovers that I had in my old 3000 GT-VR4. And you can set them to basically race car stiff or very comfort grandma mode. And I don't think we're at grandma mode, but we're definitely not at race car stiff either. So we have a good balance of both in this car. The steering is weighted very, very nicely. What I love about this car versus the Evo that I had, which was Prime Driven's last car, is the steering was extremely light in that car, which meant that, you know, you could do stuff with like one pinky, but with this, it's weighted just a little bit more, so you have to try just that bit harder. It's not super stiff, it's not super hard to turn. It feels like a well-made watch. It has some weight to it. So driving right-hand drive isn't that daunting once you start to get the hang of it. As long as you get the shifter placement and also the turn signals, you're fine. All right, here's a roundabout. Oh, this is great. And just slingshot it out of here. Oh boy. Oh wow. You can tell that this is meant to be a race car. Just put it into this turn. Oh yeah. And you get a little pop from the exhaust back there every once in a while, just to remind you that it's there. Now, this is not a supercar, but it definitely could be one with some mods. If you got a single turbo, if you got some fuel mods, if you got some tuning, this could be an absolute monster that would be not only, well, harder to drive, but wouldn't be as fun. I think this, at this power level, is just perfect. Lets you play around and it just puts a smile on your face. And when you get the downshifts right, oh, it's so rewarding. Into third, bam. And down to second, which is a weird one, but it's okay. Oh, that's awesome. And we got a little traffic, but that's all right because I am in a right-hand drive masterpiece with only 76,000 kilometers, by the way. I think that's around 47,000 miles. All right, we've slowed down to a residential zone. There's some potholes, and this car is performing beautifully, especially for a car with bigger wheels with low profile tires and an aftermarket coilover suspension. I'm going specifically for these bumps and nothing's happening. I mean, I can feel a little bit, but the tires are quiet, nothing's rattling, nothing's squeaking, nothing's coming apart. But now that we've slowed down, I can talk to you about the attention that this car gets. Now, this isn't a Lamborghini or Ferrari where most people will know that that is something really special. This car is gray, it's a Nissan, it has that 90s look, so not a lot of people are gonna know what it is. But for the people that do know what it is, they will freak out. I mean, I've had people follow me in their cars just to give me a thumbs up. I've had people just honk their horns, blare their lights. It's just insane when people know what this car is. When they see that GT-R badge, they really have a good time. Because how often are you gonna see something like this? Now, this was imported under the 25-year rule, and this is 100% federally legal. So there's not gonna be any weird knocks at your door if you win this thing from the federal government saying we have to crush your car. This is 100% legal, just like any Camry on the road, so you don't have to worry about anything with a car like this. Now, the R34s that are driving around Florida specifically, those guys might need to worry if they leave the state, but this car, you can go anywhere and not worry at all. All right, I rolled the windows down just so you can hear a little bit more of that turbo noise. And on turns, on these long sweepers, it really, really comes into its own. Have that little backfire from the exhaust, and it just all feels so good. Oh yeah. This thing is such a pleasure to drive. So let's see where that red line is, shall we? RPM, and it just wants to go and go. This thing is amazing. And those brakes, those brakes are pretty dang good. It feels so planted, so at home. I need one of these, I really do. The fact that you can just win one by spending $1, you can't beat that. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to get one of these, cause yeah, I'm convinced. Woo! Boost! And one more time for old time's sake. Let's go! 6, 7, 8,000 RPM. Oh boy! That is a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. That is a lot of fun. And you can do it without breaking the speed limit. You don't have to go 1 billion miles an hour to enjoy this car. This car is totally usable under any sort of county road speed limits. Man. All right, I'm gushing. I think it's time to end the video. All right, that was a fun drive. I am completely smitten with this car. This is Godzilla. This is the genesis of the R33, R34, and R35. So the fact that you can win one of these cars, shout out to Prime Driven, link in the description below. Go check it out, and you can get this exact car. I really wish it was me who was winning this car, and I'm actually gonna look for these cars for sale because I'm now very jealous. But until next time, this is me reminding you guys that on cars like this, actually not on cars like this because this car doesn't really need anything, but on cars like mine that do need a lot of work, you guys need to wrench every day.